I think we're live. If we're live, can I see in the chat that we are live, that everybody can hear me? Okay, we're good and there's no delay. So actually, all right, well, welcome back everyone who is here. Actually, what I'm playing is NERD, She Wants to Move. And the reason why I'm playing that is because I was thinking this morning about if we're heading into a conversation about identity today. I was thinking about the sorry, 1 second. Let me, I need to turn off the AC. I'll be right back. All right. See, yesterday, folks were asking for podcasting tips. That's one tip. Always have your AC and fan off whenever recording. So, as I was saying, if we're headed into a day talking about identity and career growth, I was thinking about what makes us unique and where we started from. And actually, I was thinking about my first AOL screen name, and it was NERD1838. And for some of you who may not know, this was the original group that Pharrell Williams was in before he became a global superstar. And so that's what I was being inspired by this morning. But again, welcome back to day 2 of Techqueria's Latinx Heritage Month celebration. I hope you all had a fantastic day yesterday. I was seeing some reflections on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. And it seems like there were such amazing conversations going on. So I'm really excited to help kick us off on day 2 and grounding us into this really exciting day, talking about identity and what it has to do with career growth. So yesterday I spoke about my own personal journey as a podcast producer, and how it began with being fired from my dream job to building my initial podcast, which was Immigration Mike, and building it brick by brick, interview by interview, until I got the opportunity to ask someone for a chance to become an intern. So this is part 2 of that story today. So to put it into context, I got the chance to intern for a podcast called Latinos Out Loud, and this is a well-known comedy podcast. But what most people don't know is that I had just turned 30 and I was an intern. I mean, I had my MPA, I had my career going, but it was an opportunity to learn a lot. And it was a very humbling moment where, you could imagine, you would think that a podcast producer interning would be with the switchboards and like with all these big guests, etc. But it was really, a humbling experience of holding doors open, making sure that guests were taking the right elevators, bringing water to them in the middle of an interview. And at the time, I started out all as small tasks, but it taught me the path to becoming a podcast producer, which essentially is a project manager, but for audio. And through that experience, I worked my way to becoming associate producer in 3 months. And then in 6 months, I became the podcast executive producer. So at the same time, I was doing my work in nonprofit at Race Forward, and I wanted to combine what we were doing in the communications department with this podcasting work. So 6 months later, we launched Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, and I, became the executive producer of that podcast. And it's a podcast about racial justice. But what I love to do is like bring my own flavor to it, my own elements to it. And because of that, and working with our hosts, last summer during the uprisings, Momentum landed on #1 on the Society and Culture list and in the top 50 of the Apple Podcast top charts. And now Momentum is one of Race Forward's biggest facing projects, and it's a new medium to the future of the racial justice work. So the reason why I wanted to tell this second part of the story is because in order to perform at a professional level and really make the work stand out, there are 2 qualities that I lean on the most, and that's versatility and being multifaceted. So, you think of a podcast producer, again, you think of, say, Pro Tools, and you think of this Blue Yeti microphone. But really, my authentic self is someone who is rapping J. Cole and Drake lyrics all the time and watching Friends and Grey's Anatomy and knowing TikTok trends. And actually, I just learned how to dance salsa within the last 6 months, which was the hardest thing I've probably ever had to do, because it's really like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your feet, right? Um, but that, I feel like being multifaceted is so important, and making a podcast episode unique, a podcast series unique. And so that's why, the past few days I've been here in Las Vegas at the National Immigrant Integration Conference, because I'm piloting a new type of podcast, one where we do post stage interviews and we expand on the conversations and really ask the hard hitting questions. And so I'm excited to pilot that and bring that to the work that I do. So I think it's really important to think outside the box, but be inspired by the stories and the experiences and the authenticity that you carry within. And so, from what I was seeing yesterday, folks are so excited to share in this type of convening, in this type of space. And again, just like I said yesterday, we're all writing new chapters and new stories in our careers, in our communities, but essentially collectively in this type of atmosphere, what we're doing is together building one big collective story. Um, and so I think that that's the magic of it, that's the power of it. And again, just for today, day 2, talking about latinidad, identity, intersectionality, it is these multiple layers of, that we carry within, that just makes this work amazing. And so on that note, what I'm going to do is introduce our first speaker, Bruna. I hope we're ready on the backstage for Bruna. Let's check. Okay, cool. I see Bruna there. So it's my pleasure to introduce Bruna. She is a first-generation undocumented immigrant and later an MIT-trained engineer, mountaineer, and investor. Bruna knows what it's like to challenge the odds, break through barriers, and overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. So if Bruna could join us. Let's see. Hi, Bruna. I see you on screen. I can't hear you. If you could press the unmute button. That unmute button is just a problem these past couple of days. All right, Team Sin, you may need to get off and then join the stage again. All right, so in the meantime, as I was saying, my first AOL screen name was NERD8138. Would love to see if you remember. Okay, wait, we have Bruna back. Here we go. Someone's taking 2 shots of espresso. I see that, Sophia. We're still working on this end. So if you all remember your first AOL screen name, if you could drop that in the chat. While we're still working on this end to get the audio going. Okay, it's me by myself once again. Soccer Girl 1023, Reina Dimples, Latin Care 7, Hippie Zoe, NITHA 16. I can't even, I can't decipher that. Shiny Blue 07. But you all have to put why was that your screen name, or why you chose that? Actually, the other one I had was V1 Intellect. I don't know why I was so concerned about. Let's see, Silver Doc 666, Rock Poet 89. I like that, Rock Poet 89. Okay, got a little bit of a dichotomy going on there, right? I like that. Huge holes in my cheeks. Silver Doc Martens, and I was goth. Mine was Silver Doc 666. O2 Daizzle. Messi. Michael Jordan, of course. That's true about the XXXs for sure. I remember that. All the girls had that. Tigress something. King Joker 0789. Let's see. Okay, I see Bruno back here. Still can't hear. That's pretty cool screen name. Oscar. O2 Dazzle. Well, I guess as we're, if there were lyrics that you posted as your away message on AOL, from what band would it have been at the time? I think for me, it probably would have been Blink-182 lyrics, maybe at the time. Maybe Nelly too, as well. You're right, Sophia. They don't know. They have no idea. Although they are leading in TikTok trends these days, so they're pretty cool in their own way. All right, Cardi B, Goo Goo Dolls. Whenever I land in the airport, I'm always playing Iris in my headphones. Taking Back Sunday, of course, My Chemical Romance. Linkin Park, Backstreet Boys, of course. Jimmy Eat World, The Middle, love that. Taking Back Sunday. Hawthorne Heights. Dashboard Confessional, of course. I'm mad nobody has said Simple Plan yet. I think that's the other one I would go with. All Time Low. I think I also might have gone through a Good Charlotte phase. Yeah. There we go. Good Charlotte. Thank you, Cesar. Oh, MySpace songs. Okay, I remember that. Tupac, of course, California Love. 50 Cent, yes. Justin Timberlake. I think that's what you mean by JT, Marilyn. Yellow Card, yes. So for everybody who's still joining, we're experiencing some technical difficulties on the back end. So we're just sharing AOL screen names, what songs you had on your MySpace, or lyrics on your away message. So hop in the chat. 30 Seconds to Mars, 3 Days Grace, Panic at the Disco, Gavin DeGraw. Oh yeah, so it's Latinos Out Loud. Jukebox brain. I think that's a great way to think about it. A jukebox brain, and that's it has this whole catalog of like decades now of like great music. Lil Wayne. Well, Lil Wayne, which songs from Lil Wayne at the time? Because I think at the time he still hadn't come out with the Carter 2. I think. Bucket list. Let's see. DJ Moonrock. Wait, oh no, yes, DJ Moonrock. I see that. Okay, let me just check what is going on at the back end here. Kobe Odonis, for sure. And then he had the other song with Lady Gaga and Akon. Fireman, Studying Like My Daddy, of course. Motley Crue. All right, getting a text message here.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, Bruna,
okay.
There you are.
Great.
How are you? We're over here scrambling, trying to get you in. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My apologies. I was clearly having some technical difficulties, but everything has been fixed, so we are good to go. Thank you.
So before I hop off, Bruna, my question is, you're a triple threat, right? Investor, Mountaineer, and you work in tech. I want to ask you, what is the most exciting part about being a Mountaineer?
Oof. I would say that there is nothing like the rush of endorphins that you get when you get to a peak and nature rewards you with an incredible view that you have earned. I think the pain of earning that view makes that view that much more beautiful than if you were to just drive up to it. I think if you drive up to it, it's beautiful and it blows you away. But when you earn it, when it hurts, it's that much more meaningful.
And so what song do you usually think of, like when you get to the top, to that peak? We're all sharing songs here.
That's a great question. Right now, off the top of my head, I think there's a song by Manu Chao. He's an excellent artist from Spain. He actually sings in Spanish and English and French and in Arabic. Super cool, very diverse, multicultural singer. And I think he has a song that says, "Can you hear me falling down? Can you hear me when I'm far from home?" And whenever I'm alone in a mountain, I think that song comes to me like, "Can you hear me? I'm really far away. Can you feel me?" And I think it's directed towards my family. I wonder if they can feel my presence when I'm so far away.
That's deep. I like that. I'm gonna actually go listen to the song right now as I leave you to your part of the talk. It's great. It was great to meet you, Bruna, and I will see you all in a bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Handel. All right. So thank you all for having me today. I am super excited to be here. I think this type of event is exactly what our community needs and deserves right now. So today I'll be delivering the keynote speech to get the day started. So here we go. It was a Sunday, 6 a.m. when I got a phone call. It was my mom screaming hysterically on the other line. "Ice has broken into her house. Ice has broken into her house," she managed to say between sobs. "They've taken your father." What is adversity? What is dolor? And what happens when there are mountains of both in front of us? Most importantly, what can we do to take those mountains of obstacles and of pain, turn them right back on their heads, and use them as a superpower to propel us forward? Hi, my name is Bruna Moskal, or rather in our native tongue, my real name is Bruna Fernanda Moscol Duran. I am Peruvian. I am, as my accent would suggest, proudly an immigrant. And I am a formerly undocumented person, an illegal alien and non-existent. I am also, however, proudly American. I am an engineer, a mountaineer, and an investor. In 2010, I became the first undocumented student to ever be admitted to MIT in the school's 200-year history. Since then, I've kept on using the challenges of the immigrant experience to climb even more mountains, ever higher peaks. Some of those mountains were made of injustice. Some were made of stone. We all have mountains to climb. But whether your mountain is breaking free from the shackles of an unjust society, or whether it's adventuring into territory your lineage has systematically been kept out of, or whether it's making your foreign name known and your brown face seen and your accented voice heard in a new space, you can use your pain, your burden, your baggage, and your trauma for fuel. And if you can learn this skill, if you can recycle your insatiable pain into an insatiable hunger, you can be the most prepared to climb that mountain. You will be the one that takes that peak. I want to tell you 3 stories on adversity today. These stories will be brought to you through the eternal rungs of time and of space, carried through by 3 Latina women: my grandmother, my mother, and myself. Each of the stories has one lesson on turning adversity into a fuel, converting doors shut down on your face into open gates of welcome, changing places of emptiness and of hurt into new places decorated with achievements and with hope. And finally, turning the inevitable pain of simply moving into a singular existential question, whether to move up or down. My hope is that these 3 stories, carried forth by a string of intergenerational Latina women, leave you with 3 lessons you can apply in your path forward today. Though adversity is an unavoidable part of life, it does not have to be defeating. In fact, with the right tool set, it can be catapulting. My grandma, Miss Nelly Querol Alache, was born the year of the Great Global Depression of 1929. An exceptionally poor girl in the port town of Supe, Peru, she was the eldest of 6 siblings. One day, her fisherman father went into the waves of the sea and never came back out. With her mom's share of the work now suddenly doubled, my grandma, though still a child herself, was forced to step up as caretaker. When one of her small siblings passed away in her arms due to undernourishment, she knew she had to do something new. You know, they're looking for people down in the state capital. I have a friend of a friend. A neighbor of a neighbor must have said. This was exciting but problematic. For one, Nelly was still a little too young to make the age cutoff. For 2, Nelly didn't really have any of the secretarial skills the job was requiring. How could she? Raising 5 siblings in an impoverished port town didn't let her get much of a proper education for herself. And finally, for 3, those capital jobs were reserved for fancier people, better educated, better connected, just better suited. We need people who can type. Can you type? An underaged and underdressed Nelly was asked during the job interview. Remembering what was waiting for her back home, the inherited centuries of poverty, the literal physical hunger, the systematic exclusion of people that looked just like her. Yes, I know how to type, she lied, proceeded to get the job, and spent the entirety of her first paycheck in introductory typing lessons. Sometimes you need to use the pain of being unseen to envision what you can be instead of what you currently are. Being unseen or discounted is unfortunately a big problem in our community. While Latinx people are the largest ethnic minority in the United States, we are still severely underhired, underpaid, and underrepresented in almost every professional vertical. In tech alone, while the numbers vary by study, they remain dreadfully low, with Latinx representation in the tech sector hovering around 5%. There are many root causes of this problem, but the end result is the same. Our community, though brimming with talent, remains largely unseen. Being unseen is painful. Growing up feeling like you'll be discounted is painful. And though it is true that it is unfair to carry this burden on our shoulders, though it is true that there are much larger and much older systems of oppression that contribute to the systematic exclusion of our people, it is also true that these systems are changing. We are changing them, and we are changing them fast. Until then, however, we need to make room for ourselves in the room where nobody has made room for us before. Force your face into the place that's never had a face like yours. Raise your voice into the noise that so far has been lacking. Take that insult in stride. The insult of the discounting of your infinite potential. And use that pain to look in the mirror and envision what you truly can become. Then force your way into that first step. The rest will follow. The hero of our story, Nellie, was a girl so systematically excluded that had she not forced her way into the room where she did not yet belong, she may have had to go back to that small little port town to await her ill-assigned fate by the sea. Nellie had to be witty and brave. You, too, are witty and brave, which is why you're here, part of the 5% of Latinx in tech. Some of you hearing this had an easier time breaking in. Perhaps you had a fantastic teacher. Perhaps you had a solid ally and an established professor. Perhaps he was a caring counselor, or perhaps an old friend who made that first referral. But for a lot of you, like Nellie, you indeed had to force your way in, at least at the beginning. As time goes by and your career and aspirations grow, there will be many more new rooms to break into. Many times where your potential will once again be thrown aside. Plenty of occasions where your talent and ability and drive will all go unjustly unseen. And it will hurt. All of them will hurt. Every rejection from a new job, every pass-by opportunity for a well-deserved promotion, every no from an investor, business partner, bank, they will all hurt. I urge you to lean onto that pain. Take it. Use whatever filter these naysayers are seeing you or not seeing you through and look into the mirror. See what they see. Then throw that mishap vision of you in the trash. Instead, see what you see. Use the pain of being discounted, even the anger, if you must, as fuel. Use it to identify the first step in making your vision of yourself a reality. I like now to fast forward in time by half a century. I started this speech by recounting the phone call that split my family apart. My mom on the other end of the line, feeling an unimaginable desperation by the sudden termination of her family as it was. The profoundly destabilizing helplessness of watching her husband, innocent husband, being taken away in front of her eyes. But let me take this opportunity to give a little bit more color into the woman behind that phone call. By the time that call was taking place, 65 years had passed since that fateful day where an undertrained but overpushed 16-year-old Nellie had shown up to her country's capital demanding a job. During that time frame, there had been a lot of changes in Nellie's life. Changes that had affected her children and her children's children after her. Monica, the next hero of our story, and the next woman to teach us a new lesson, was born to Nellie into what now was a middle-class family. In a country still suffering from the scars of cultural misogynism and low expectations for women, Monica was college educated. She spoke 3 languages. Like her mother before her, she knew how to type. In fact, she also knew a whole lot of other things. President of this and president of that, Monica was an all-around high achiever, high earner, high roller. But then economies crumbled and political pressures formed, and before you knew it, the changing tides of fate spelled a new word on the horizon: immigration. Professional or not, Monica was forced out of her native Peru, and like millions of Latinx immigrants before her, made her way north to the promised land of hope. America, home of the brave. And brave is exactly what you have to be to immigrate into a new land where you know nobody, are nobody, have no name, and have to start your life all over again. Yet, that is a story of many of us here today. Every year, 300,000 new Latinx immigrants make their way into the land of opportunity to look for a better life for themselves and for their loved ones. It is a heroic endeavor, and one which largely contributes to the 60 million Latinx population in the US today. Heroic endeavor aside, it is one that also comes with an endless list of legal, financial, and societal challenges. On the day of that fateful phone call, Monica was facing one of the largest legal ones yet. The Department of Homeland Security had decided her husband, homeowner, business owner, tax-paying, law-abiding, and clean record member of society was a threat to his community, and that as such, he had to be removed from the country. Effective immediately. Without his home, without his business, but worst of all, without his family. It's hard to imagine the pain Monica must have felt that Sunday morning. The desperation, the helplessness of watching her husband's hands being tied down in handcuffs, the recklessness of him being pushed out the door into a patrol car, the restlessness of the son that they shared, desperately trying to stop the whole thing from happening. But most of all, the pain. The pain. ICE took Monica's husband away that Sunday morning. The months and even the years that followed were hard. He was the main breadwinner, and though together they washed cars and trucks for a living, being an immigrant to a new country had long taken her previous high roller lifestyle away. This was no longer a job she could do on her own. Without a job and without a husband, Monica found herself, her usually packed days, now suddenly empty. Her house, which she will soon lose to the bank, now suddenly empty. A big hole in her life and her heart had been cracked wide open and grew ever wider by the day. What did she do with this hole? At the age of 50, Monica, recently unemployed former car washer and now forcefully separated wife, decided to go back to college. Following a lifelong childhood dream of studying abroad, a dream that had been impossible for her as a child, she now enrolled at the local community college, part-time, while she looked for work and rebuilt her life. 6 years later, at the age of 56, Monica walked across the podium. She had earned herself a second bachelor's degree, completing her childhood dream of studying somewhere far, far away from home. How do we fill the holes in our lives? What do we do with the places of emptiness in our hearts? And how do we stand back up when tragedy knocks on our doors, knocks us off our feet, and leads us out of nowhere to a gigantic chasm of empty? The lesson Monica brings to you today is to learn to fill these chasms of pain and redecorate these broken places inside of us with new hope. Every year, 250,000 of our Latinx peers get forcefully removed from our borders, splitting countless families and causing endless heartbreak along the way. This is trauma. These are scars that cut so deep into our community, It is astonishing that we keep on walking afterwards. But we do, and we will. Some of you in the audience have experienced this exact same chasm of injustice. Others have experienced other types of pain that have cut similarly just as deep. Regardless of what caused such a broken room inside of your soul, I am here, or rather, Monica is here, to let you know that you too can learn to refill these broken rooms of empty. Use it as a new space of your life that needs to be filled. And then fill it with new hopes, new dreams, new accomplishments under your belt. And if you can do this difficult but possible task, turning a room of broken into a room of new, you will learn to manage grief. And with each new heartbreak, you will emerge stronger, newer, more complex. So far, we've had two strong women give us two life lessons about pain. Nellie, who used the pain of being unseen to imagine what she could be and force her way into that room. And Monica, who used the pain of profound emptiness to fill that void with new gumption and with strive. And now we'll have a third story. This one's mine. I started this speech by stating that I am an engineer, a mountaineer, and an investor. Well, that is true. I was also at some point an undocumented child. In fact, it was how my story got started. It's very hard to describe what growing up undocumented is like for the simple reason that I will never know the difference. You only do childhood once. As a child, I simply knew my family and I had to hide. For what reason? I didn't know. Growing up undocumented presented its own set of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. I distinctly remember being 17, a straight-A student, a nearly perfect SAT score, and also being keenly aware that despite all of that, I would not be able to go to college. Because that's how things were back then. Before President Obama established DACA, the 600,000 undocumented students who graduate from US high school simply didn't exist. If you didn't exist, how could you apply for any type of tuition assistance? Unable to apply for any sort of financial aid or scholarships, I didn't qualify for any government help. And I couldn't even work due to lack of paperwork. I couldn't drive for the same reason. Completely closed in on all sides, my straight A's essentially meant nothing without the little piece of paper that acknowledged me as a legal human being. A little piece of paper that as a child immigrant, I lacked through no fault of my own. At age 17, crushed by the gigantic burden that is placed upon immigrant children and unable to attend university as a result, I decided to take the matter into my own hands. And through the magic of the internet, I started teaching myself math from MIT through YouTube. Ranked as one of the world's best universities, MIT was the only school at the time who filmed all their lessons and put them online. It also happened to be my dream school, a universe above anywhere else. I wanted desperately to be there. And so, parched for knowledge and wronged by unequal opportunity, I decided that if I couldn't go to college, I would bring college to me. And so, when my classmates started moving away to head off to their own choice universities, the state flagships and the private out-of-states, I moved nowhere. Putting the envy and the hurt aside, instead, I opened my laptop and began to learn. First, calculus, then physics, then biology. To make a long story short, I got to MIT eventually, a year after the fact. A local private university heard of my case, and like my grandmother 60 years earlier, a friend of a friend spoke to yet another friend. Private funds were donated, and papers were signed, and before you knew it, I had a spot at a local university only minutes from my house. It wasn't fancy, and it wasn't MIT, but it was college. I was going to be able to go to college. Excited by this extraordinary turn of events, I chose a triple major in math, physics, and bio. A year later, I applied to college again, and this time, MIT made an exception. A first in 200 years type of exception. I was in. It was around that time that I took up mountaineering. Maybe it was a lifetime of overcoming mountains of obstacles. Maybe it was the ancestral Incan blood in my veins. Maybe it was a little bit of both. All I know is that after I climbed the mountain of injustice that was placed upon the children of immigrants to this country, I decided to continue climbing mountains forevermore. Real, physical mountains. Gigantic peaks made up of ice and of stone. My story today, and my lesson to you all, comes from one of these mountains. Mount Akonkawa in Argentina is the tallest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, and the entire Latin American continent. In fact, it is the tallest mountain anywhere in the world outside of the Himalayan range. Standing at near 23,000 feet tall, the peak of Mount Akonkawa is more than 15 Empire State Buildings stacked one on top of the other, or more than 2/3 the altitude that a 777 commercial plane flies at. At the peak of the mountain, the air is so thin that it only holds 40% of the oxygen that air holds at normal sea level. Most of humanity lives at sea level, where your blood gets 100% of the oxygen that it needs. As you gain altitude, the vertical column of air on top of you gets shorter. At even 80% oxygen saturation, your organs begin to malfunction. At 40%, your muscles are dying by the minute, and you need to get out of there as soon as you can. That's what the peak of Mount Akonkawa looks like, 40%. For some incomprehensible reason, unknown even to me, I had gotten it into my head that I wanted to climb this mountain. But I wanted to do it alone and unguided, carried only by the strength of my own two legs and by my willing and brave heart. On the day where our particular story takes place, there I was, climbing from base camp at 14,000 feet, already taller than anywhere in the contiguous United States, to the first high camp at 16,000 feet. Due to the extreme hazardous conditions, climbing at altitude is measured by time and not by distance. For example, while the distance from base camp to the first high camp where I was going was actually only less than 2 miles, it takes climbers an average of 2 to 4 hours to complete this 2 miles. And even then, it takes anywhere between 2 and 3 days to fully complete that section of the climb. That's because you're carrying dozens of pounds of supplies on your back. You have to do the section of climb several times over to get all of your supplies into one place. Fuel to melt the snow and make water. Many clothes to keep you warm in the -40 temperature at the peak. Enough food for 3 weeks. Shelter in case of a storm. And gear. Lots of gear. On the day of my climb towards that first high camp, there was a raging snowstorm taking place. Carrying about 30 pounds on my 130-pound frame, I felt the hail hit diagonally across my face, just at the perfect angle to sneak through my collar, down my 3 jackets, and into my bare chest. I was cold and tired and out of breath, and maybe even a little scared about the enormity of the challenge I had undertaken. At that precise moment, I got angry at my mother. You see, my mother, the hero from an earlier story who had taken the crushing deportation of her husband as a perfect occasion to go back to school, that hero had raised me. And she had done so with an incredible, limitless amount of endless positivity. Positivity that was greater than the sun, bigger than our universe. The whole of existence existed inside my mom's positivity and possibility for our future. You can do anything you set your mind to, Brunita, she had said countless times. And I guess I had believed her. I had believed her when, during rainy weekends, when we couldn't go to the beach, the only free activity in South Florida, would instead drive through the beautiful neighborhoods of Miami and look at the beautiful houses of Millionaire's Row. You'll own one of these one day, she had said. And I had believed her. I had believed her when, crushed by the gigantic legal roadblocks that my undocumented status presented to me when trying to get an education, she had confidently stated, "You will go to an Ivy League one day. You will." And I had believed her. And I had believed her when, at the age of 24, I told her I was going to climb this mountain, solo and unguided. It was going to take 1.5 years to train for. It was a lot for a Miami kid who saw snow for the first time in her life at the age of 20, for a kid who had failed a mile run every single week of middle school. But once again, my mom and her limitless world of possibility had chimed in. "You are going to climb that mountain," she had said. And I had believed her. But now, cold and alone, stuck in that snowstorm of 15,000 feet of altitude, I was regretting believing her. School, I could understand. Maybe I had always been a bit of a smart kid. And money, well, maybe I could understand that too. Good careers pay well after all. But a mountain? You're going to climb a mountain? One of the tallest in the world? And by yourself? Without anyone to help you or call for help when you inevitably fall. That's not positivity talk anymore. That's a life or death scenario. And you either have it in you or you don't. And right now, I was strongly leaning towards don't. I didn't have it in me. How could I? I remembered my mountaineering club back in college where I had gotten all my training. And I remembered who my peers and mentors had been. They were tall and strong and blonde and had been hiking since childhood and skiing just as long. Not me. I was 5'1" and not that strong. And while the mountain, of course, does not care if your hair is straight and blonde or brown and kinky like mine was, the mountain certainly cared about your strength, about your practice. And my 5'1", 130-pound body, well, it just couldn't compete. But I had believed her. I had believed my mother, and look where it had landed me. I had dared to believe in dreams, and now look where I was. Stuck in a snowstorm, a material I was still not entirely comfortable in, more than 5,000 miles away from home, alone, carrying 30 pounds on my pack, my chest wet and freezing, my legs tired. Stupid. At that moment, I had one choice. Either way, I had to keep on walking, for not walking would bring about certain death. I couldn't stay where I was, or I would literally freeze in the 10 degrees below zero weather I was currently experiencing. And there was only one path. I either walked up or I walked down. Through the tears of anger and frustration, and most of all, bitter disappointment in myself that had been so silly to believe that I had it in me to accomplish such a feat, through my stomach sick with the thin air, through my lungs heavy with the lack of oxygen, and my legs tired with the extra weight, somehow through it all, I kept on walking up. Sometime after starting the climb, as I passed the famous Conway Rocks, the midpoint of the day's hike, I ran into a young man who was climbing back down from the summit. "How long since you left base camp?" he asked, and I told him. "Wow, you're doing really well. You're going very strong," he commented on his way back down from the hill. I kept on walking up. An hour later, I ran into somebody else. this time a guided group. The lead guide approached me. "Where are you from?" he asked. "I'm American, but originally I'm from Peru," I explained. He smiled and chuckled to himself. "I could tell," he said. "You're an Incan. You walk really well." I kept walking up. All in, by the time I reached high camp number 1 at 16,000 feet, I checked my watch. Out of the 2 to 4 estimated hours the climb takes, it had taken me only 2.5. I had not only been on time, but even been a little ahead of the curve the entire time. Why had I felt so inadequate? Why had I felt like I was doing so bad when in fact I was doing pretty good? Why had I felt like it had been a mistake for me to be there in the first place? The question this story poses for you today is, are you walking uphill right now? Are you climbing a mountain today as we speak? A mountain that feels like it's currently crushing you under its weight? Have you dared to embark upon an expedition that you are certain you are most likely losing? And are you sitting here today in the audience behind your screen saying to yourself, "I was dumb to follow this path. I was dumb the day I thought I could do it. I was dumb." I don't know why difficult things hurt. But I can tell you that that day on the mountain, either way would have hurt equally. Going up or going down. Up kicks the breath out of your lungs and hurts your shins and your thighs. Down destroys your knees and your ankles, and the probability of you falling increases. Both ways are dangerous. Both ways hurt. And yet, the two ways are the only two directions you can take. You can either keep on moving onwards or backwards. Sometimes simply being where you already are hurts. Maybe you're stuck in a job that doesn't fill the walls of your infinite, borderless heart, and you're not sure where to go from here. Maybe it's a long relationship that has long gone stale and you're not sure how to quit. Maybe it's a dream you've secretly harbored in the sacred chambers of your soul, a dream that you've put on pause, placing it there on one spot through the years, immobile. But you can't be immobile. Just like that day on that tall mountain in the Andes, where sitting immobile would have certainly brought me certain death. Whatever situation is splitting your heart will also crush you unless you take action. Whichever path you choose will hurt. And whichever path you choose may very well make you feel inadequate, like you shouldn't be there, like you didn't make the right choice. When you quit your job for a bigger fish, you will feel inadequate. When you leave a situation that was no longer working and search for a better fit for your heart, you will feel inadequate. When you dare to lift the dream that's been sitting there in the corner of your soul, sitting there just staring, waiting for you to one day have the strength and the faith in yourself to pick it back up, you will feel inadequate. When doubt creeps in, remember to keep on walking upwards. Let your passion and your inner instinct guide you towards that bigger something that you seek. Push through the pain. Remind yourself that whatever you do will hurt, and that if it's going to hurt anyway, you might as well keep on going onwards. You are not as inadequate as you sometimes feel. It just hurts to get there. That's all. The stories brought to you today and the lessons they carry can be applied to all of our lives. When you're feeling unseen and like the world is unjust and not letting you in, I want you to remember Nelly. I want you to remember that sometimes you have to show up and make room where nobody has made room for you before. When injustice comes knocking at your door and empties the rooms of the sanctity of your peace, I want you to remember Monica and your choice to redecorate a broken home of empty into a home of new. And finally, when you embark upon a new endeavor and you feel that first feedback of doubt, of loss, of grief, and of fear all creeping in, I want you to remember that all movement hurts, and that if it's going to hurt anyway, you might as well keep moving up. I didn't make it to the very top of that mountain that time. I made it to the last high camp, camp number 3, at 20,000 feet. But then there was a 4-day snowstorm with minus 30 Fahrenheit winds, and all the climbers had to turn back down. That's okay, because I'll just try again. And this time I will know what pain to expect up there, and I will be even stronger. If you didn't finish climbing whatever peak you were seeking, I urge you to try again. Take the pain that you've become familiar with, the pain of your first attempt, and learn from it. Next time, you'll be even more ready. I want to leave you all with a phrase in Spanish, the native tongue of many of us, that I think captures the spirit of these 3 women and these 3 stories well. Caminante no hay camino. El camino se hace al andar. Or in English, traveler, there is no path. The path is made by you walking forward. Thank you.